I was gonna say is, so you get out, and now you're like you're stepping away. You're like, that's it. I'm done, right? Because they kind of took you out. Is that right? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I just at that point when I added up on the rally up like around 3880-ish area, I just felt like the minute I got in, I could just feel it. They're just immediately against me. So in my mind, I was like, okay, you could either keep trying to press this and lean on this high, or we're already near this high and it's a Fed day. How much do you want to give away at this point? Because like on the way down, as I was clicking in selling, everything was going my way. Right. On the way up, now I'm just going against the grain. And I just recognized at this moment, it's like, okay, you already had a great day going. Then you added on the bounce, gave it all back. Now you're selling up here and now you're down. It's like, okay, where's this headed? And it just, at that moment, I just clicked out before even waiting for them to potentially make a new high. Just basically click it in and just clicked out because I said to myself, this is just not good. You got to wait now. And thank God I did. I actually just stepped back. I didn't even go back in the rest of the day, and I watched it keep breaking. But I'm like, you know what? At this point, I was kind of already, I think, in a fragile state where I knew that if I step back in, now I have a weak hand. So the minute it's against me because I blew a good day, I'm just going to be puking them. So at that point, I just said the day is over for me.
Right. So this is really interesting because you were reading you couldn't care less about actually price action in the marketplace, because at that point what you were reading is actually the emotional price action of yourself. You knew that the point of vulnerability was if it was a complete let's take a different scenario. You didn't do any trades. You came in clean, right? At that point in the market, you probably could have assessed it and probably done a good entry job. But because you had already gotten, financially battered, which means you got emotionally battered, you were like, you know what? It's more intelligent for me to recharge. It's much more intelligent. It doesn't matter what the market does. I know what I'm going to do is going to be the wrong thing because I'm pressing it, right? Would you say
100%? 100%. Because think about what I also said leading up to it. I haven't been trading a ton lately, so I stepped back in on a Fed day. Even though I've been watching every day, I haven't been super active. So I step in, all of a sudden start off with a really good day, which is great, right? Next thing you know, I give that day back in just a matter of minutes. And now I'm stepping in and now I'm down money. And at that moment, like I said, I'm just in a fragile state now because I go from having a really good day to even to down, and really in such a short period of time that I looked at it and said, I'm just not fit right now mentally to be trading this volatility. I should have taken that day. I shouldn't have been aggressive on the re-ads. So I just assessed it really quick and just pulled the plug. And at that point, once we start going down again, even though I felt really strongly that we were going to keep going down because I've been very bearish lately, I looked at it and said, at some point you just have a weak hand, and what I mean by that is that if now I'm stepping in as things are going down, and even though you can go back and look at the chart, it looks like we were melting, but the problem is that one little uptick is I feel that pressure feels immense to me. So I can either go to the micros maybe and trade really small, which is maybe something I could have done. I didn't, but I could have done that and just got myself back in the game. But at that point, I felt checked out because preoccupied with stuff in the past. The day was what it was.
Right. So first of all, it's such a mature move, and so interesting because God knows we've all been there. But the other thing I think is what people underappreciate. It's much worse to make money and lose it mentally than it is to kind of lose money and then make it back. What I mean by that is much worse to trade after that event. I always lose the most amount of money after I first make money, then give it back, and then I'm spending the rest of the time trying to get back to that original pot of gold that I had before. Because what you're thinking about is, oh, it's not just a loss. I had more money. It's and I need to get all that money back. And that is a vicious emotional cycle.
Well, I think that most people have their worst days after their best days, and the reason why they do that is because their guard is down. Now they're not playing defense. They're only playing offense. Right. I had the best year of my career followed by the worst year of my career, and that's not by accident. and that's because my guard was down. And the worst year of my career was the best start of a year I ever had. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's exactly what you said. Once you lose the most amount of money is coming off of a scenario where you're up money, because in your mind, even though I had been doing this for a while, when I had one of my worst years, it was just psychologically you're broken down and it's hard to recover. I don't care who you are. If you make a lot of money and then you give it all back relatively quickly, you can't help but think about what you did. You're embarrassed, you're pissed, and you just want it back, right? And so inside, no matter what, you're making those decisions intraday, and part of you is pressing to get back to where that was. And only time can heal that. I mean, that's reality. I mean, even the best traders that I've ever met in my career, they don't recover that fast. It takes them a little bit of time. Their biggest mistakes come after a mistake that they know they shouldn't have done, and then the bigger mistake happens right after that. But it wasn't. The big mistake comes when all of a sudden I'm short the boat at 38.80 and they're just blowing through me at 3900 and I puke the high. Right. And then all of a sudden I'm long and I'm just getting.
I mean, you're long, and they just flush it from beneath you because that's the point of pain on both sides.
Now I'm bullish.
Exactly. I've been there. That's so interesting. So I always so this whole idea of recovering from big loss. I always use the analogy of it takes 1 minute to blow up a skyscraper. Maybe it takes a couple of days to just put the dynamite in, and 1 minute to blow up a skyscraper, and then it takes a whole year to build it brick by brick back up. And it's the same thing sort of, with big losses. You cannot, once you blow up the skyscraper, you can't build it in one day, You can't build that, those losses back up in one day. And people have a really, really hard time with that. Yeah.
Well, that's why it doesn't matter how much money you start with in your trading account. It's people say, well, I don't have enough money to start. That's not true. I've seen guys start with huge amounts of money and just blow that too. It doesn't matter, because to them, that amount of money might be more, important or less important to a person. But whatever you put in your trading account to start, that you don't need a massive amount, because the bigger amount you have, probably as things start to go south, all of a sudden you'll become a worse risk manager. I look at myself and said, the beginning of my trading career, when I started, the first account was 25,000. It lasted me almost a year. And then as time went by, on my second account of 25,000, when I got down to a very low amount very early, I blew that amount much quicker, because I became a worse risk manager when I had less in my account. It was all of a sudden a frustration ploy where I was just I just not even out. I can't take this, right? I need more money. And then eventually, when I had very little money in my account and I had years of experience, I turned it around, and I turned a little amount into a bigger amount, because I was more disciplined. I was a better risk manager. One of the things I think is the most I don't want to say misunderstood, but I think that something that a lot of traders talk about out there that I think is wrong, and maybe they're not traders, I don't know, but I think that something that's on social media that really bugs me is, if you make $100 a day, you'll make $2,000 a month, because it's 20 trading. If you make $500 a day, you'll make $10,000 a month. If you make $1,000 a day, you'll make $20,000 a month. Just keep growing your number every day, and eventually it'll add up, and you'll make $1 million a year. Right. That is the biggest bunch of bullshit there ever is, because of this reason. Nobody makes money every day. Nobody. Okay. And even the days where I made money, let's just say 8 out of 10 days, right? And I kept my losses relatively small. You've got expenses, right? Fees, some commissions, depends on, what products you're trading. 2 days, a lot of times, even if you're losing what you're making, up 500 or down 500 to make it simple, those 2 days probably end up costing you 4 or 5 days. So if you make money 8 out of 10 days, it doesn't really add up to what you think it did. Yeah. And that's at an 80% daily win rate, which another thing that people say, is something that they do, and some people may be able to do it. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's not probable for most people. I've been doing this is my 24th year. In my best years, I'm lucky if I get to 50% of the time. even for the month. I mean, my
Wait,
best year ever was
you
like around 30 something percent.
wait, sorry, 50% of the days, or what do you mean by
50% of the time that I'm right of trades, right? So like if I did 100 trades, 50 of them would be right, 50 of them would be wrong, right? And the days are always, my days are going to be hard to say by that, because the days, some days I'll make, you know, whatever, 10 grand or something. Another day I'll make 1,000. One day I'll lose 500. So my days are very all over the place.
Right.
And it goes back to the point I want to make. So like my trades are, like I said, even in my best years, my win rate is very, if I can get to 50% is like unbelievable, right? Because number one, I'm taking quite a few trades. So that also numbers are kind of against me. Some people that maybe trade less often, it's probably, you know, likely to go higher, but I also rotate in and out of trades.
I'm going to stop you there because it's such an important point people really, really don't understand. The more trades you take, the lower the probability of a high percentage win you'll have. Because the more trades you take, you are exposing yourself constantly to unexpected risk in the market. It doesn't matter how the setup looked on a chart. It doesn't matter if you had 1,000 instances, you know, yesterday of that setup. Today is a different day. You're not going to have 1,000 instances of that setup in this exact same way. So like the more trades you take, actually, the harder it is to have a super high win ratio.
Correct. I've learned that when I went back and looked at my career, I remember at the beginning being like, man, I'm making money most of the time, but I'm still losing money, or I'm breaking even at best. And I'm like, I don't understand this. It's driving me crazy. And what I realized was that when I'm doing good, I'm not doing good enough. When I'm doing poor or I'm not doing good, I need to lose less. So to be able to take my numbers and shift them, right? So I needed the bad to be less bad, and I needed to be good to be even better. So that's why when you look at, you know, the way I look at trading is simply as when I'm doing good in that moment, I have to recognize that, and I need to take as much from the market as the market is going to give me. Because if I don't, then I don't buy myself time for being wrong until this moment happens again. And psychologically, that's different, because some people will get to the point where, let's just say that their number is $1,000. They make $1,000, right? They come in there and they're up 1,100, and it just happened in the first 5 minutes of the day. They're faced with a tough decision. It's early. I could leave and go do something. I hit my number. You know, the day's over for me. You feel great. But then you look at it and you're like, everything I did worked. Do I keep going? Do I stop? Right? What do I do? So for me, I always keep going.
When I am in sync with the market, I'm just staying with it, because my strategy absolutely is in sync with the price action. When I'm not in sync with the market, I'll step away. Right?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I remember the first time I made $100,000 in a day. And to some people, that's, you know, it's a lot of money, right? I mean, believe me, I got to that number.
It's a lot of money for a lot of people. It's not. That's a lot of money.
So I remember that day vividly. I remember even calling my dad afterwards and being like, I can't believe I did this. You know, it was just a few years back. I had no money and I couldn't, you know, trade my way out of a paper bag. And I looked at it and said, you know, what happened that day when I evaluated it? It was only like a 15-point day in the S&P. And I remember in the morning, one of my buddies, you know, we were all up money in the morning, and I looked around and said, you know what, this is a good day. I'm going to stay. You know, at the time I was in the pit, so I had other guys. I wasn't trading in the pit, but I was trading around the pit, and I was trading electronically.
Right.
And I said, you know what, I'm just going to stay. Some of the guys were all leaving. I see people leaving, coming out of the pit. And I said, I'm just going to keep staying. I'm looking at my screen, and I just kept going, man. Next thing you know, it was like around 2 o'clock Central at this time. And I was like, you know, getting so close to getting to that number. I had a couple more good trades, and I got just above it. And I said, you know what, this is something you never dreamed of in your life. But what I learned from that day, when I went back and looked at it, was we only had a 15-point day range in the S&P. The difference was that mentally coming into that day, I had been doing really well. So I had the ability to stay and risk the money. Like if I was up 60,000 versus 50,000 at that point, it wouldn't have mattered. So I just kept going and going and going and just doing everything by what was, you know, just happening in the market and how my strategy was reacting to it. So I looked at it and I said, wow, I can actually do this. And I was able to just feel that I don't need the market to be really busy. I don't need it to be perfect every day, because if I can do something like this, and maybe not to those numbers all the time,
Right.
I can exist in this business. So it really made me feel like, it made me realize why I need to be leaving when I'm not trading well. It made me realize why I need to be staying when I am trading well, because you see that in that day, nothing special about it, but I was able to take out a record day for me. And I think that just psychologically changed the way I looked at the market, really, from that point going forward. I mean, even prior to that, I had felt this lead up to it, but at that moment, it really solidified it to me. So I say this to all the people out there, is that if you have a number in your mind that you want to make every week or every month, that's a tough road, because you don't know when that's going to come. You have to exist in the market every week and every month, and that opportunity that comes, you don't know. For me, this was, I want to say, for that big day for me, or even some of my biggest years, came in 8-9 years after I started. I mean, but that's, to me, I looked at it and go, it was well worth it, because at that point, it finally started to happen for me. It took me 3-4 years really to start making money, and then 8-9-10 years before I had, the years that I just never dreamed I could have. So realize that existing in it long enough is really where the opportunities lie. And when things are going well, and things are going well, and we all know them, that self-awareness, you've got to keep taking, Boris, about this. But I think that it's not just about every time you feel good and things are going good, you keep taking. There is kind of an art to it.
Yeah, let's talk about the art, because that's a really important point. But then there's the really hard part, which is the art. So could you talk a little bit about the art of that?
So the art of it is, so let's go back to the example of like the person who's up $1,000 in a day, right? That's your good day. You made 1,100 in the first 5 minutes of the day, and you're like, wow, I did everything right. Everything looks good, and you're actually feeling good mentally. You've been doing well. You're in this moment where you just kind of feel like you just did what you needed to do, and you're just getting paid, right? And this is the way you feel it should be, right? At that point, to me, what you got to do is you got to keep trading, and you got to risk 50% of that day, right around there. You've got to risk 50% of that day, and you've got to just keep going. And if you make another 300-400, now you're up 30-40% more than you normally make. Now you got to take on a little bit more risk, right? Now you got to take on, instead of risking your normal maybe 250 or 300 in a trade, maybe now you risk 500 a trade. Maybe you trade a little bit bigger. What you do is you test yourself when things are going well, when you're up money. Another example of something that I did, I remember doing my first 50 lot. I was actually trading upstairs in First Options. Some people may even remember this firm. I was on the trading floor, but at the time, I was like 4 years into it, or 5 years into it. And I went upstairs and they had some trading screens, and I remember sitting down and just doing it. And I was a day where I was, for me at this point in time, was just a massive day. I remember I had finally hit like 10 grand for the week, and I had made 2,500 on this day. So I was up, having a great week for me. And I was up $2,500 around there on the day. And I sit at my computer and I looked around and I'm like, man, things are going really good for me today. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put on a bigger position in an area I really liked. And I remember sitting there waiting. And finally it got there and I'm like, oh shit, am I going to do this? Am I really going to put on, 50 contracts? And I remember just clicking in. I remember putting the 50 on, waiting, it wanted to tick against me, and I just hit the bid and got out. And I'm like, oh, okay, I put 50 on, you did it, right? Next time I did it again. I tested myself. I tested how much I could handle in size when I was doing good. I tested how much I could handle risking more, what it felt like,
Right.
Because as we grow, there's certain things that are going to change. So for example, you can get good at making $1,000 a day. And some people will say, well, that's the path to making $5,000 a day. But how do you get there? Well, how you get there is by testing yourself in the moments when you're up. Most people will actually push it when they're down.
Correct. I was going to say, everybody does the exact opposite of what you're
opposite.
we all test ourselves when we're losing. So we basically we're gonna, I lost on 10 lot. I'm gonna go 50 lot and bully this market out.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and make 2 ticks on it. And next thing you know, they lose. The minute they click in.
Get it all back. Guilty as charged on that one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna say I still don't do that. I do. I mean, sometimes I'm just like, all of a sudden I'm losing, and all of a sudden I'm muscling in a trade, and then sometimes I'll just click out and laugh and be like, "You're an idiot." You're just pissing money on it. Because I never saw myself be anything but a trader. So if you have the vision of this is what you want to be, then you have to find a way to make it work. Some of the best advice I ever got was from my old man, who didn't know anything about this, knew nothing about markets, right? He still asks me to this day, this is 30 years ago. He started actually almost, not quite that long, but I started in 95, but he still asks me what a future is. He's like, what is it that you're doing? And we kind of joke about it. But the best advice my dad ever gave me was, Tone, if you want to do it, figure it out. And I was like, yeah, no shit, right? But it was such great advice, because he was basically saying to me, if this is something you love and you see yourself doing, then you've got to find a way to make it work. See, most people, I think, when they come into this, they only look at it as a means to making money, right? So if you look at it only as a means to making money, there's a lot easier ways to make money. I will tell you that right now. But I would say that if you see yourself as a trader and you look at this from that perspective, then you have to settle yourself in and really give yourself that time to become what it is that you seek, because that is a totally different thing than just coming in and trying to make money in this business. So it's just a very different, so I felt it's always embedded in my personality.
What's the, how do you get past the fear of doing the trading?
Accept the result before you get in. The healing process begins immediately.
Right.
So I look at it like this. If let's just say that trade, what would that trade cost that person, right? What is that cost of that trade? And you just got to give the money away. You got to say, if the cost is $500,
right.
If you accept that before you get in, the healing process has already begun. It's already begun. If I say that trade's going to cost me $500, it's already begun. And if you're willing to accept it in your mind and your body at that moment, then you'll hit the button. And the other thing is, I would say, is if it's a matter of the stop was too big for that specific trade, or you felt like you were seeing some in the market that maybe was giving you kind of something that maybe you didn't think it was going to be a great trade, what did you and I talk about? Use the smaller product. Now, maybe that is the smaller product for you. I don't know, but for that person, right? But I think that's the other thing, is you can always trade it smaller. But for me, those are the 2 ways. Accept the loss before you get in. The healing process then begins. So I learned to be able to, if I saw Goldman doing something, or Merrill, or the biggest traders, I could trade alongside, and there was nothing stopping me. It was just a matter of price. So I would go back to how I see the people behind it, and what's really, I think, psychologically helped me understand is that I know that somebody has to make that market, whether it's man or machine, and nobody wants to be getting hit aggressively in anything that they hit or that they put out there. And if they have a bunch of orders being put out there, they will always pull back. And that's why you see volatility the way it is because anytime people are aggressively hitting prices, that the people that are on the opposite side of that, because obviously even when we're breaking, there's bids the whole way down. It changes the way I look at it versus trying to pick that bottom versus I know that someone's not going to step in and just all of a sudden buy everything when all of a sudden things are happening. So it stops me from going against the grain like so many people would have that mindset. I try to go with it. So as they're breaking, I'm selling. As they're rallying, I'm buying. Not always, but my point is most people get blown up by baiting the power moves when they don't realize that no one wants to make a market when everyone's hitting the same side. So I remember there'd be times where everybody in the pit would have their hands away from them. Well, what would that mean? That means that they're all selling The only time you and everyone say, well, maybe that's the time to buy, but it's not the time to buy until at least some of it turns around and you see this. And so there, you don't have to be first.
Right. Interesting. Wow. Super interesting. Yes. 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 That's actually an interesting question. Why are some people able to, shrug off losses, and other people are just have to be right on every trade?
I think it's, this will be a great question for Denise. In my experience, I will tell you this. So there's a few types of people that I know. There's some people that are addicted to losing. That's just reality. I see it in gamblers. I see it in traders. Losing becomes a normal thing for them. They just keep pumping money into it, and they never put the work in or the time to actually turn away from it. And so the losing is actually the excitement. They may not want to admit it, but it actually is. So to them, that's why they'll take on bigger risk, because they're just like, at this point, they're going,
that is so interesting. Wow.
I mean, I see it often. I've seen it many times in the past. And I think there's the other type of person, like me, when I started, I'm super competitive. I want to win every day. And when I'm not winning, I want to break mice and I want to throw shit and I want to get aggravated.
Right.
And then I had to really turn into Zen Anthony over time, because I don't want to be, a psycho. And what you start to realize is that you either want to do this for a living and you want to accept that aspect of it, of losing, or you just want to just try and win as much as you can, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. And there's this end game. So you have to find the balance, right? And I think, there is no human being, I wouldn't say none, but there's very few human beings that are built internally to withstand this, because most of us that are doing this are really competitive, so we hate losing.
Right.
And so therefore we become that one person who's just like keeps forcing it and it just doesn't happen. Then there's the other person who's just like, I don't give a shit if I lose, comes in, you see that person and you're like, holy cow, they just made all this money. But then 3 months later, they're like, I'm done with that shit. And what happened? Well, because they made it and lost it, and that's just the way that they were. And then there's the people like us that, we just grind it out, and it's that's what we do. So we've actually bought into the fact that this isn't going to be easy. It's going to take time, and I'm going to take some hits along the way. It is what it is, man.
One brick at a time. That's sort of my view. Excellent. Anthony, thank you so much. What an amazing show. Thank you again.